Hi everybody, I'm Randy. This is the Literate Texan, where I talk about books, literature, highbrow, lowbrow, and everything in between. And today I'm talking about 6 of my favorite classic books. Now, what's a classic book? Well, it's one that stood the test of time and is expected to stand the test of time and to be read for hundreds of years. I have on my particular list today several what you would call modern classics. These are classics that we think are going to prove themselves, but haven't yet. These are my favorites, or some of my favorites, that I just pulled off my shelves. And I love reading them. One of the reasons that I chose them is because they're all so much fun. I could have easily called this video 6 favorite classic movies that are a lot of fun to read, or 6 classic books that are a lot of fun to read. I could make one about classic movies too, because God, I love classic film. But that's not the topic of this video. The topic of this video is it's 6 classic books from my shelves that are favorites of mine. Book number 1 in this collection is Shakespeare Sonnets. You're not going to find a list of favorite classics or a list of best classics for me that does not include Shakespeare. It's just not going to happen. And as I explained in one of my earlier videos, I think the best entry point for Shakespeare is through the sonnets rather than the plays. Also, I'd have a really hard time picking out a play as my quote-unquote favorite, or even one of my favorites, because they're all just so good. Even the ones that are bad are good in a way. So, this is Shakespeare's Sonnets. That's 154 poems by the master himself, Shakespeare. And just for fun, I'm going to open this at random and read one of the sonnets. Okay, so the sonnets tell a story, and it's over the course of the 154 poems with 4 distinct characters. There's the narrator, the poet. There's also the young man. There's also a rival poet, and there's the dark lady. And there's a story that's going on, but you don't need to see the whole necklace to appreciate a gem, and each gem is a sonnet. And this is sonnet number 29. It's just the one I happened to open it up to. And I just love reading this out loud. There's been no rehearsal or anything like that. It says, "When in disgrace with fortune, in men's eyes I all alone beweep my outcast state, and troubled deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate, or at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorned to change my state with kings." Okay, it turns out that's one of the best sonnets of all. You know, one of the things, the sonnets are part of my book club this year, and we just did them last month, but we didn't just do them last month. They're meant to be ongoing throughout the year, kind of as background music for the rest of our reading. And one of the suggestions that I had, and I'm going to make it again, is give each sonnet a grade. That one, to me, that's an A+. Okay? And that way, once you've given each of the sonnets a grade, you can rank them, you know, into your top 5 or your top 10, and you can probably even explain why you liked it so much, why it was so resonant for you. You aren't going to love every one of these sonnets. You're not going to hate every one of these sonnets. But, man, I got to tell you, this is the Arden Shakespeare edition. There are other editions. I did a price check for you guys on Amazon. I wanted to share some of that information with you here too. So on Amazon, if you get the Kindle edition from Dover is a specialty thrift publisher that publishes public domain works. But if you get the thrift edition from Dover, it's free. And the rating the users on Amazon gave it was 4.5 out of 5 for that free version. You can find free versions of the sonnets online too. Then there's the Folger Library edition, which I also have, and it's terrific. The Folger Library is located in Washington, D.C. But that edition's in paperback. It's $10.99, and it's got a 4.8 out of 5 rating. And then the edition that I've been holding up and reading from is the Ardent Shakespeare edition, which is a lot of people's favorites. And the Ardent Shakespeare edition is $13.99. It's a little bit more. But to be fair, it does have quite a bit more explanatory material and that sort of thing. So that's book one of my 6 of my favorite classic books. Book number 2 on my list of favorite classics is Charles Dickens' book. Just as I'm not going to have a list of favorite classics without throwing some Shakespeare in there, I'm certainly not going to have a list of favorite classics without throwing in some Charles Dickens. This I read on my Kindle Fire, Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. This is the Dover Thrift Edition. So I read this as a buddy read this year with a friend of mine. He didn't finish it. You can see my video with Trent a few days ago. He came to visit me at the hospital. But I love the artwork there. But this was so good. I'd read it once before and did not realize just how terrific it was. But yeah, this is just dynamite. It's a miraculous novel. And I guess it was his next to last novel, his penultimate novel. So it was really good. But I want to read some of it for you too, if I can get my Kindle to stay on. I have trouble with that. It's got something to do with the case and the side of the device. It knows that I'm open and reading it if it touches it in a certain way, which sounds kind of gross when you think about it. So, chapter 1. My father's family name being Pirrip, and my Christian name Philip, my infant tongue could make of both names nothing longer or more explicit than Pip. So I called myself Pip, and came to be called Pip. I give Pirrip as my father's family name on the authority of his tombstone and my sister, Mrs. Joe Gargery, who married the blacksmith. As I never saw my father or my mother, and never saw any likeness of either of them, for their days were long before the days of photographs, my first fancies regarding what they were like were unreasonably derived from their tombstones. The shape of the letters on my father's gave me an odd idea that he was a square, stout, dark man with curly black hair. From the character and turn of the inscription, also Georgiana, wife of the above, I drew a childish conclusion that my mother was freckled and sickly. To 5 little stone lozenges, each about 1.5 feet long, which were arranged in a neat row beside their grave, and were sacred to the memory of the 5 little brothers of mine, who gave up trying to get a living exceedingly early in that universal struggle, I am indebted for a belief I religiously entertained that they had all been born on their backs, with their hands in their trousers pockets, and had never taken them out in this state of existence. So yeah, there's some really great stuff in there. But yeah, I have read half a dozen Dickens novels. You know, I certainly haven't read all of them, although I'm working on it. I am working on it. I plan to finish all of Dickens before I shuffle off this mortal coil. But I did some price checking on this one for you too. And of course, this is in the public domain. If you want to, you can always go to Project Gutenberg and get these things for free. But if you just want to go to, and this was published in 1860, by the way. The Shakespeare Sonnets were published in 1609, so we took an almost 200-year jump between book number 1 and book number 2. But Great Expectations, you can get on the Kindle through Dover Thrift for 99 cents, or you can get it in paperback for $5.29. That's not a bad deal. It's a big novel. So that's just through the Dover Thrift Edition. It's got a 4.5 out of 5 cumulative rating on Amazon. But there's also the Wordsworth Classics Edition, $2.99, and the Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition for $4.99. Those are also on Kindle, and those had ratings of 4.3 out of 5 and 4.5 out of 5, respectively. But I think those are vastly underrating what an absolutely terrific novel this is, because, you know, I've read half a dozen Dickens. There's 15 books in the oeuvre, or however you pronounce it. And so I haven't read all of them, but I've read a third of them, and this is definitely the best of the bunch. Absolutely terrific. So that's book number 2, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Book number 3 on my list of favorite classic books is the Complete Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. This is the edition that I have. It doesn't have a... this might have had a dust jacket at one time, but it doesn't now. but it's a lovely edition nonetheless, and it's my favorite edition. It's the one I read out of the most. Only problem is the font size is getting a little bit small. But this one is a little bit closer to Great Expectations. It came out in 1887, okay? So, and rather than read the first line of the Study in Scarlet, which is the first Sherlock Holmes book, I'm going to fast forward just a little bit to this passage here. And this is where Sherlock Holmes is explaining his theory about how the brain works. I guess Watson has just explained to him that the Earth goes around the sun or the moon goes around the Earth or something like that, which Holmes didn't know, and he's kind of surprised by it, but at the same time he doesn't care. He says, you see, you appear to be astonished, he said, smiling at my expression of surprise. Now that I do know this fact, I shall do my best to forget it. To forget it? You see, he explained, I consider that a man's brain originally is like a little empty attic, and you have to stock it with such furniture as you choose. A fool takes in all the lumber of every sort that he comes across, so that the knowledge which might be useful to him gets crowded out, or at best is jumbled up with a lot of other things, so that he has a difficulty in laying his hands upon it. Now, the skillful workman is very careful indeed as to what he takes into his brain attic. He will have nothing but the tools which may help him in doing his work, but of these he will have a large assortment, and all in the most perfect order. It is a mistake to think that that little room has elastic walls and can distend to any extent. Depend upon it, there comes a time when for every addition of knowledge you forget something that you knew before. It is of the highest importance, therefore, not to have useless facts elbowing out the useful ones. But the solar system, I protested. What the deuce is it to me? He interrupted impatiently. You say that we go around the sun. If we went around the moon, it would not make a pennyworth of difference to me or to my work. And at this point, Watson doesn't even know what Sherlock Holmes does for a living. He's been trying to figure it out without asking him, which is just kind of silly. But anyway, the Sherlock Holmes, so far, too, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, so far, everything I've chosen is one of my favorite classics. A lot of fun. I could have easily made this a video about fun classics to read. And there are very few books that are more fun to read than Shakespeare. Shakespeare is one of Shakespeare and Sherlock Holmes. But Sherlock Holmes is one of the reasons that I got into reading in the first place. So yeah, it's absolutely terrific. And in, 1887, it's in the public domain. It's easy to find cheap copies. Arthur Wallens publishes a 49-cent Kindle copy, which you can also get for $27 in hardcover. That's rated 4.6 out of 5 stars. But then there's a Kindle edition from Random House, the guys who actually, I think, own the IP. But you can get that for $5.99 on the Kindle, which I think would be kind of a waste of money. But you can get a paperback of it for $7.19. $7 for the complete works, the complete Sherlock Holmes canon is a pretty good deal. And that has a rating of 4.8 out of 5 stars across the Amazon. So that's number 3 on my list of favorite classic books. Number 4 on my list of classic books is The Lord of the Rings by JRR Tolkien. And that was published not too long after Sherlock Holmes, but now it's getting pretty modern too, because the complete Sherlock Holmes, okay, I got these out of order. It's not The Lord of the Rings. Number 4 is All the King's Men, which was published in 1946. And I have, a really lovely slipcased edition. It's an anniversary edition from the original publisher. It's in really gorgeous shape. I bought it at Recycled Books and Records in Denton, Texas. All the King's Men is a book that I read in my high school history class. And it was a great pick, man. I owe my history teacher one for that. His wife was the high school librarian too, and she was really terrific at picking out books. But All the King's Men came out in 1946. Well, let me read some of it to you. Golly, I almost forgot. So here's what the book looks like. It's got one of those it's got the pretty end papers, and it's also got one of the cloth bookmarks. And then, it's on really nice paper here too. But let's see what this first one is all about. All the King's Men is a political novel, and the main characters are essentially analogs of actual characters in politics during the time period. So, Mason City. This is from chapter 1. Mason City. To get there, you follow Highway 58, going northeast out of the city, and is a good highway and new, or was new. That day we went up it. You look up the highway, and it's straight for miles, coming at you, with the black line down the center coming at you, black and slick and tarry shining against the white of the slab, and the heat dazzles up from the white slab so that only the black line is clear, coming at you with the whine of the tires. And if you don't quit staring at that line, and don't take a few deep breaths and slap yourself hard on the back of the neck, you'll hypnotize yourself, and you'll come to just at the moment when the right front wheel hooks over into the black dirt shoulder off the slab. And you'll try to jerk her back on, but you can't because the slab is high like a curb. And maybe you'll try to reach to turn off the ignition just as she starts to dive. But you won't make it, of course. I'm going to stop there because there's a racial slur in the next sentence, and I'm not going to repeat it or try to figure out what's appropriate to repeat or not. But you can probably tell from the quality of the writing. Robert Penn Warren was a poet more so than a novelist. But as far as novels go, this is just absolutely terrific. I can't imagine that this isn't going to still be read 100 years from now, I'm pretty confident that Harry Potter probably won't be read 100 years from now. But All the King's Men is still going to be read by anybody who's still reading at that time. Who knows? The number of readers are just dwindling. But you can get this for $9.99 in paperback on Amazon or $15.99 on the Kindle. So it's cheaper to get it on the paperback, which is unusual. Usually it's cheaper to get it on the Kindle. Either way, the rating from the folks at Amazon who do the reading and the ratings, 4.4 out of 5 stars. And I think that's a horrible underrating, okay? I'm disappointed at that. But anyway, that is number 4 on our list of favorite paperbacks or favorite classic books. Okay, so now we've got up to number 5 on my list of favorite classic books, The Lord of the Rings, which was published in, 1954. So I'm just going to hold up my copy of The Two Towers. The Lord of the Rings was published as 3 books, but it's actually one long book. That was the intention of the author, that it's one really long novel of between 1,100 and 1,300 pages. That was made for an unwieldy book, for sure. So they wound up publishing it in 3 different editions, and each edition is split into 2 halves. But it's often called a trilogy, but strictly speaking, it's not a trilogy because it was never meant to, it was always meant to be one single thing, one single volume by its author, JRR Tolkien. Not that anybody seems to care about that. If you've seen the Rings of Power on Amazon, you can tell they don't really care about what J.R.R. Tolkien's wishes were because they completely ignore the canon. I saw a beautiful illustrated edition of this on Amazon for $47 in hardcover. And then the Kindle edition was $22, but it's got a 4.8 out of 5, which is really, really high. This, like Sherlock Holmes, was one of the big books that inspired me to read growing up. And so I'm just going to read. Normally I would read the first paragraph of the first book, but actually the first paragraph of the first book is tonally a good bit different from the rest of the saga. So I'm going to slip into the second book in the quote-unquote trilogy, which is not really a trilogy, but I'm going to slip into The Two Towers here, being the second part of The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Okay, and so we're going to skip the synopsis, and we're going to go straight to Book 3, Chapter 1, The Departure of Boromir. Boromir was one of the characters. So Aragorn sped on up the hill. Every now and again, he bent to the ground. Hobbits go light, and their footprints are not easy even for a ranger to read. But not far from the top, a spring crossed the path, and in the wet earth he saw what he was seeking. I read the signs aright, he said to himself. Frodo ran to the hilltop. I wonder what he saw there. But he returned by the same way and went down the hill again. Aragorn hesitated. He desired to go to the high seat himself, hoping to see there something that would guide him in his perplexities. But time was pressing. Suddenly he leaped forward and ran to the summit, across the great flagstones and up the steps. Then, sitting in the high seat, he looked out. But the sun seemed darkened and the world dim and remote. He turned from the north, back again to the north, and saw nothing save the distant hills. Unless it were that far away, he could see again a great bird like an eagle, high in the air, descending slowly in wide circles down towards the earth. Even as he gazed, his quick ears caught sounds in the woodlands below on the west side of the river. He stiffened. There were cries, and among them, to his horror, he could distinguish the harsh voices of orcs. Then suddenly, with a deep-throated call, a great horn blew, and the blasts of it smote the hills and echoed in the hollows, rising in a mighty shout above the roaring of the falls. "The horn of Boromir," he cried. "He is in need." He sprang down the steps and away, leaping down the path. "Alas, an ill fate is on me this day, and all that I do goes amiss. Where is Sam?" As he ran, the cries came louder, but fainter now, and desperately the horn was blowing. Fierce and shrill rose the yells of the orcs, and suddenly the horn calls ceased. Aragorn raced down the last slope, but before he could reach the hill's foot, the sounds died away. And as he turned to the left and ran towards them, they retreated, until at last he could hear them no more. Drawing his bright sword and crying, "Elendil, Elendil," he crashed through the trees. And I'm going to stop there. That gives you a pretty good idea of Tolkien's prose style. But it's really beautiful. It's really elegant. At one time, I read a chapter out of J.K. Rowling, her Harry Potter series, and I read a chapter out of The Lord of the Rings. And there's just no comparison in terms of the quality of the prose. So that's number 5 on my list of 6 of my favorite classics. So that was number 5, Lord of the Rings by JRR Tolkien. And now we're going to slip into really modern classics. The author of this book is still alive. This is The World According to Garp, which is number 6 on my list of favorite classics. And there's John Irving on the back. Always a distinguished looking guy, and his author for photographs. This, like the works of Shakespeare, like the Complete Sherlock Holmes, and like the Lord of the Rings, inspired my love of literature as a very young person. Okay, so this was, well, when was The World According to Garp published? This is the 40th anniversary edition. I bought it a couple of years ago. It'll be inside here. I didn't write it down in my notes, sorry. Copyright, 1976. Okay, so that's pretty close. That's within my lifetime. That's nowhere near 100 years ago. 50 years ago. 50 years ago, maybe. Anyway, a lot of people are already familiar with The World According to Garp because there was a movie starring Robin Williams, which made the book more popular. And this is the 40th anniversary edition. This is the edition that I buddy read with Greg over at Another Bibliophile Reads. I'll read to you out of it for just a little bit. And then we'll call it a night. Chapter 1, Boston Mercy. Garp's mother, Jenny Fields, was arrested in Boston in 1942 for wounding a man in a movie theater. This was shortly after the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, and people were being tolerant of soldiers because suddenly everyone was a soldier. But Jenny Fields was quite firm in her intolerance of the behavior of men in general, and soldiers in particular. In the movie theater, she had to move 3 times, but each time the soldier moved closer to her until she was sitting against the musty wall, her view of the newsreel almost blocked by some silly colonnade, and she resolved she would not get up and move again. The soldier moved once more and sat beside her. Jenny was 22. She had dropped out of college almost as soon as she'd begun, but she had finished her nursing school program at the head of her class, and she enjoyed being a nurse. She was an athletic-looking young woman who always had high color in her cheeks. She had dark, glossy hair and what her mother called a mannish way of walking. She swung her arms, and her rump and hips were so slender and hard that from behind she resembled a young boy. In Jenny's opinion, her breasts were too large. She thought the ostentation of her bust made her look cheap and easy. And it is interesting that the World According to Garp begins with an anecdote about his mother, because she's just as much a main character in this book as he is. You know, they ought to share top billing. You know, you could almost call this Jenny and Garp, or Garp and Jenny. But this one's $14.99 on the Kindle. And then if you want the hardcover like I've got, it's $47. There's also a paperback edition available for $13. And the Amazon rank is 4.5 stars out of 5. So there you have it. That was number 6 on my list of favorite. So thanks for watching my list of my 6 favorite classics, or 6 of my favorite classics. You could ask me what my 6 favorite classics are tomorrow, and I'd give you a different list, especially depending on where things are on the shelves at any given time. But I love all 6 of these books. They're really beautiful to me, and I would read any of them again happily and enjoy the reread, and probably will before it's all over with, before it's all said and done. But like I say, thanks for watching. Before our next video, you know, stay hydrated, stay sexy, and I'll see you next time.